I mean, law school definitely doesn't teach you anything about
No.
how do you grow teams. And over the years, I've also really had to stretch and understand, what does it take to grow a team, and what does it mean? And I do think a lot of it has really pushed me to put on more of my business hat. And again, that's a skill that we as lawyers don't necessarily know right off the bat, right? It's a skill that you have to develop. And it's really the business need that shapes what is a legal team going to look like.
Not Billable is brought to you by LawTrades, the largest marketplace for hiring freelance corporate legal talent. With over 3,000 vetted attorneys, legal operations professionals, paralegals, and contract managers, an app to make tracking and paying for work easy, and world-class 24/7 customer support, LawTrades is the best place to hire full-time or flexible legal talent at a fraction of the price of traditional outside counsel and staffing agencies. Get matched to great candidates today by using the link in the description and mention this podcast to get your first 10 hours of legal work for free. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Margolis. I'm the head of community at LawTrades. If you don't know LawTrades, we're a legal tech company that provides on-demand, flexible legal talent. And we're talking about attorneys, paralegals, legal operations professionals, contract managers, the whole gambit of legal professionals. Today, we're talking about building legal teams to accommodate business units that are growing as well. I'm super excited. I have a bit of imposter syndrome. I'm not going to lie to everyone here because we have these awesome guests. I will allow you guys to introduce yourselves because I will not do you justice. Frank, do you want to start?
Sure. So my name is Frank Zenente. I'm the legal director at Uber now, but just a little bit about my career journey. I started out in private practice, supporting startup companies for several years, and then made the jump in-house where I went to Visa. I was the first external lawyer hired to help a rapidly growing sales team at Visa. After about 5 years at Visa, I made the move to Uber, where I was, again, the first attorney hired to support a new business unit called Uber for Business. For those of you who don't know, Uber for Business, it is the B2B arm of Uber, where we provide various products and services for business travelers and companies. So growth is for U4B is really coming from outside sales. So my team is really focused on reviewing contracts and part of the negotiations and supporting all the product reviews.
Awesome. And goes there. Sorry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gulzar Babaeva, and to share a little bit about my career journey, I started in private practice and spent 5 years doing predominantly corporate and mergers and acquisitions work. And then after 5 years, I went in-house at Target, where I spent about 11 years at Target specifically. And there I started out doing a lot of different procurement and commercial contracts type of work. And eventually my role really evolved into becoming an expert in the technology space and really leading our technology practice at Target. And about 18 months ago, I decided to come to Shipt, which is a company that is owned by Target. So it's a Target subsidiary. And I'm still continuing my journey within the umbrella of the Target family, but again at Shipt, and Shipt is also a gig company. And we also basically we do connect our the workers with the gig workers with solving various delivery logistical issues, et cetera. And some of you may be familiar with us, and maybe you get also your groceries, for example, delivered by Shipt. And at Shipt specifically, I lead our corporate and compliance team, where I lead a team of both attorneys and compliance professionals. My team focuses on a variety of regulatory issues that includes privacy, data protection, and it also includes all sorts of other regulatory issues ranging from consumer protection to marketing to our adult beverage program, to any other regulatory issues that you can imagine. And the last, what I call the last side of my house is really charged with is the compliance and ethics and the governance around compliance and ethics for the enterprise. So I've really enjoyed leading my team over the last almost 18 months. And what's really interesting is when I came in, I really had only just one team member. And I've been blessed that I've had the opportunity to grow the team over the past year and a half that I've been with Shipt.
That's awesome. That is so cool. And I love Shipt. I'm a user of Shipt. I guess I'll give background too. I should have probably explained that I'm also an attorney. I used to be the director of legal and risk management at a private equity group down in Miami, Florida. In that role, speaking at least to this topic, we had grown two different business units that I had to grow with those units. And I have a little bit of experience. Granted, again, the imposter syndrome is real. Not as much as our fantastic speakers, but I have a little bit of experience. So hopefully I'll be able to provide some insight on the topic. Now, so that being said, I'd love to hear, like, experience-wise, not just growing a legal team, but growing a team generally. What is your experience in that? And Frank, I'd love to hear, what is your experience?
I think growing a team, you learn a lot, right? As a lawyer, I think we're used to having heads down on projects, working with colleagues to solve issues. But growing a team, especially in-house, you really have to put on your business hat and think about the needs of the business unit you're supporting, where that business unit is going, but also thinking about what's best for your team, how you're going to develop career paths, how you're going to help people grow, not only to create skill sets here for the company, but wherever they're going in their career. And so I think when I think about developing teams, it's really like building a mini business, and I like thinking of it that way.
That's awesome. And Gulzar?
Yeah, I love what Frank said, that you learn a lot from building a team, and that really resonates with me. I mean, law school definitely doesn't teach you anything about how do you grow teams. And over the years, I've also really had to stretch and understand, what does it take to grow a team, and what does it mean? And I do think a lot of it has really pushed me to put on more of my business hat. And again, that's a skill that we as lawyers don't necessarily know right off the bat, right? It's a skill that you have to develop. And it's really the business need that shapes what is a legal team going to look like. And of course, also when we're hiring, trying to understand what is the fit and does it work both ways? So going back to what Frank said around development too, is that a team member that is the skill set that we need, and am I going to be able to grow and develop them so that it's a rewarding experience for them too? I like to tell my team oftentimes, like, you're not just here to earn a paycheck. My expectation is that you're going to learn and grow, and hopefully I'm fortunate enough to keep you. But if I don't, then at least I have trained you well, and you've had development opportunities to be able to go and do well somewhere else too. So I do look for that too when we're growing teams.
It's not a question. I have a comment actually to put in there. You both said this now about mentoring, and I appreciate that more than you know. I'm a bit younger, right? And when I was a younger attorney, that was something I think for purposes of morale, right? When we would join teams, younger attorneys want to know that maybe we want to be trained so I could cross function, right? I could do other things inside of the business, not just maybe as a commercial contracts attorney, but maybe also as an IP attorney, or maybe employment, or whatever it may be. That means a lot. That means a lot. I appreciate both of you that is something you look for when you're growing a team, because as a younger attorney, all we want is, not all we want. We also want money. We are lawyers, but we want mentorship, and we want the ability to grow, because you're right. It may not be your last stop. It may be your last stop, but if it is your last stop, all of a sudden I am a person that has all these skills that someone has facilitated the growth of it. So it's very admirable. That wasn't a question. I mean that meaningfully as a younger attorney. So, well, that being said, and we also spoke.
And Matt, yeah. I think I would also add to that for the more junior attorneys listening in, to speak up to your manager if there's a certain skill set you're looking to build and grow. I think it's on the managers to help foster that. But if we don't know that you have an interest in privacy or some other, subject matter expertise or some subject matter area, we won't know to, bring you in on a project and have you work with that subject matter expert. So I encourage everyone to speak up.
That is actually I have a question now, guys. That was a really good question. That was a really good statement there. And I was wondering, how do you approach a manager if you are a junior attorney? And again, to both of your points, if you're looking to grow, you're right, privacy is probably the best example, like to grow into maybe being a privacy attorney or to expand skills in a different area. How would you approach that conversation? And whoever wants to tackle it first.
Yeah, I would say I love this question. And it's something I wish I had mentoring on earlier in my career. And now that I look back, there are things I would have done differently. I think part of it is just honestly just getting over the fear of how will my manager or my skip level manager perceive me if I suddenly ask for something else. Because I think I personally held fear that if I ask for that, that's going to mean that I'm unhappy or something else. I would say the number one thing is just go and do it, because you're putting yourself out there and they don't, they can't read your mind, right? They don't know what you might be interested in. So just the act of putting yourself out there, and sometimes maybe the words don't come out and it might be, awkward. You do it one time, like give yourself a pat in the back, because as you continue to evolve in your career, you're going to get more and more polished in terms of in a way that feels authentic to you on how do you ask for that responsibility. But I think the first barrier is just go and show up, however awkward those words come out, do it. And most managers, good managers, will perceive that well. Why? Because a manager like me, and I'm in a smaller team now, I really appreciate fluidity in my team. So if somebody tells me, hey, they're interested in this, we're going to try and look for space to create that space for that individual and to be able to cultivate the skill set, because you never know when we may need to move somebody strategically into that particular area. And the other thing I'll say is, if the manager, if you get the sense as a junior lawyer, you have this conversation and you get this big no, well, that's a good point of information for you to have to say, okay, well, and listen to, and sometimes between reading the lines, as to why are they saying no? Is it a legitimate reason? Maybe because right now the work within your own team is just so high. Maybe it's a point of time they say, hey, we can't do it right now, but in 6 months, I'd love to keep talking to you about that. That's one response versus just a blatant no, like that's never going to happen for you. Like forget about it. That's a very different message. And again, that's a point of data, I think, for the junior attorney to think about as they're thinking about what is next in their career. And I'd be curious to hear what Frank says about it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that response.
Same here.
I think it's all spot on. It really resonates with me. I think earlier on in my career, someone told me you need to own your own career. Don't wait for others to jump in. And so because of that, I tried to raise my hand for, stretch projects when I was a junior lawyer. And so even if you don't have an idea of what that is, raise your hand, keep raising your hand, because as a manager, I see someone that's eager to take on more work and more responsibility. I really appreciate that, because you're going to get into situations where there's a project that has to be done next week. It's going to take 100 hours, whatever it is, right? I'll have to jump in, all hands on deck. And I know that person is going to be. So raise your hands, even to Gulzar's point, even if you don't know what it is that you want to do, raise your hand and let your manager help guide you. And if your manager isn't receptive, then yes, that's a great data point to have to make a decision on, whether that's the right role or not. And then personally, what I do with my team is everyone that comes in, try to ask them, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? What skills do you think you need to get there? And we have those conversations. As a manager, I feel like it's one of my responsibilities to help train them for the role, but also just train them for their career wherever they go. Hopefully they stay within our team and the company. But if not, then I think it's responsibility to help them get where they want.
This is awesome advice. I really appreciate this advice because, again, younger attorneys, like this is a conversation we all have internally. We're all like, well, I want to learn more in these areas, especially certain private. I love using privacy because it's such a hot area right now, and we don't know how to approach that subject with the manager. So this is very helpful, and it's helpful also as a manager to understand that folks are going to be asking these questions, are going to want to expand their practice, are going to want to grow in these roles, and this is how you approach it. These are how good managers approach these things.
And Matt, can I add just one more thing?
Of course.
Just on the flip side of it, because there are times when your manager might come to you with a stretch assignment.
Sure.
And you may be feeling, let's say, like, oh my gosh, for real? Like either A, I like the job I'm doing, or I'm just really overwhelmed right now. Like for real, am I going to have to do the stretch assignment? What is going on with them? Why are they asking me this? Just the advice, especially for the junior lawyers, to be open to that. because you just never know what doors it might open for you. And it's very real, though, to have a conversation to say, I have so much going on right now. What's going to come off my plate in order for me to be able to do this stretch assignment? That's a conversation definitely to be had, because burnout is real.
Oh, yeah.
But to be open-minded, because I've had scenarios in my career where, it might be the manager, right, who is going to have a conversation around, hey, I want to stretch you. And sometimes people have very different reactions to whether or not they want to be stretched. And I think, again, I've been guilty of, at one point in my career, manager wanted to give me a stretch opportunity, and I was like, I can't do this right now. I have so much going on. And I learned a lot from that. And turns out that my leader was thinking the right way, and I should have been doing that stretch opportunity. And I did do it begrudgingly. So I wish I hadn't done it so begrudgingly, because it did end up opening doors for me. And so she had the foresight at that moment in time that I didn't, right? Because she was, more senior, more seasoned than I was, to give me this opportunity as a junior lawyer. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I still did it. And I saw the benefit of it. And on the flip side, as a manager too, I've had to have those conversations as well. And I can relate and say, hey, when I was in your seat, I know I had this similar reaction, but this is why we're doing it. So just an encouragement to be open-minded when your leadership comes to you with a different assignment or a new assignment.
That's why I changed my practice. I was in a AGC for a government agency, and they needed some help on a procurement for the procurement department, effectively an attorney to assist them. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't care. I'm a young attorney. Like, I was, generally speaking, I was more of a litigator. And I'm like, I would love to learn about how to manage the procurement process of, the RFPs, the RFQs, like really bid protests, what have you. And every day I'm thankful that I had enough coffee to be able to handle it. To your point, like, I was begrudging at some level, right? Because I was a little tired. There was a lot going on, but I couldn't agree more being in that position and changing my practice. So always, say yes. Like, and at least if you're not going to say yes, or you're like really hesitant saying yes, at least have the conversation and understand why, make it work. If there's a way you can make it work, then make it work. I think it's the best way to put it. Staying on this point, I swear we'll get back on track, but we do have a really good question I think we should probably tackle. And it's, I'm seen as a generalist, but I want to get into supporting the product team. Any tips in changing my personal brand at work so I can get into those kinds of roles? And whoever wants to tackle it first, Frank or Gozar, whoever wants to jump on.
Sure, I can take this one first.
Yeah.
So I would say try to build relationships with the product legal team if it's a separate team, or the business team. That's always really helpful. And again, if it's not your manager, if you want to ask other teams if they need help, you'll stay late, you'll work weekends if that's the case, if you want to do that. But just making it abundantly clear that this is something you're interested in learning, and that you will do what it takes to get your work done and take on this additional role, I think will go a long way. Absolutely.
And Gozar.
Yeah, so I lead our product team, the team of lawyers who do the product work at Shipt. And so I think, I think about if somebody came to us and said, hey, or, was maybe in an adjacent team, hey, I'm really interested in product. There's so much work in product. There's a lot to do. So I think exactly what Frank recommended, saying, hey, I'm just really interested to stretch into it. I bet you, like I said, good managers, they're going to come up with an opportunity for you to get into the product space. I would also say, if there is an opportunity to also build some relationships with the business product team as well, to start, showing up. And you just never know what cultivating those relationships may mean, or in terms of, again, it shows your interest in that space. And it's part of your journey, right, to understand the corporation and the enterprise as a whole. So I don't think you'd be, just like busting on somebody else's toes by starting to suddenly cultivate relationships with the business teams and product. It's part of your journey to learn more about the general enterprise and other divisions. So start doing that. But like I said, I think the nature of product and the legal work involved in product is vast. So I think there's an opportunity for everyone to play. And I'm hoping that, again, the manager would be receptive to bringing this individual, whether it's in like a small body of work or discrete body of work, or maybe putting them to say, okay, you will handle this part of product as a way of supporting or stretching into this area.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I swear we're getting back on track. I promise. This was a really good discussion. And like, again, like I have a number of friends that are in AGC roles, corporate counsel roles, and these are big questions they have, especially as legal teams grow and they want to grow with the team. So I appreciate the insight more than you know. I know they're watching and they're really thankful for it. So here's a question for everyone here, more on a macro level. The legal team, I guess, how do you identify the need to grow, right? Does the business reach out and say, hey, we're anticipating a lot of growth in this particular area? Or does a member of the C-suite reach out and say, hey, do you need to grow? Or does legal identify it themselves and say, hey, that's a lot of haze. It looks like we need to grow because I see a ramp up right over here. So what is the answer? Is it all of it? I know that was the most compound question I've possibly ever asked. Gulzar, do you want to start?
Sure. I think that's $1 million question, right? And I think it's more of an art than a science. Sometimes you feel it because like suddenly there's, the spigot has been turned on and like all this work is coming and you just don't see a slowdown. And then you got to pause and reflect, well, what's happened? What's causing that? Is it a change in the business model? Is it temporary or is it more permanent? But I would say, again, some of it is you see the work increasing, right, in a particular area, or you see a need that is, again, you're getting similar questions coming from different parts of the business that you're constantly counseling on, and that's not maybe part of your daily job, right? But I think the more importantly, it's not just looking at that, but it's also coupling with understanding, well, what's happening and really being in tune with the company, right?
Sure.
Its needs. And what's my company doing? How are we evolving? What are the business lines that we're putting maybe an emphasis on? And also looking at the external landscape, like privacy is a great example of it, right? With all the legislation and the new regulations that have come in place. And if you're a company like us that handles, right, personal information, like, okay, well, I think we need to maybe continue to grow this practice. So it's the external can also influence how you make that decision internally too. But I think, again, first and foremost, I think as a good leader, you really have to be in tune and really understand your internal strategies, because that will shed some light on where you might be seeing issues, but also being understanding of, well, what's happening externally that may also drive the conversations around where you need to grow your team.
Absolutely. And Frank?
Completely agree with everything Gulzar said. And I think I try to take a step back and look at whether the work is coming from the current body of the business or whether the business is scaling and there's plans to hire or invest in that unit. And so for the first example, I would say that it just depends on how much work each person on your team has. Can they stretch? Maybe are there people in other departments that want to pitch in to help where you don't need to go get that external resource? Can we get someone, a secondee in-house that'll help for a certain period of time? But figuring out if this work is going to be here for the long run, or if it's just here for the next 6 months for whatever reason, I think is important. And then when looking at the business unit expanding because of an investment into that unit, it's really important to understand what the work is that's going to come out of that, that's going to be needed from a legal perspective coming out of that investment. And then when are they going to hire all these additional people with these resources, and what's their hiring schedule going to look like? Right? Because, if let's say this business unit is going to get 100 new people, let's just use sales because I support a big sales team. Is it going to take them 6 months? Is it going to take them a year? And how long is it going to take them to ramp? Because what I've learned throughout my career is that you don't want to hire too quickly and have lawyers kind of twiddling their thumbs and the business kind of saying, hey, what are these people doing? And you don't want to hire too slow where the business is saying, hey, we have 100 salespeople and not enough resources. It's taking too long to turn contracts. And so it's an art. I completely agree with that statement, and more than a science. And it's really helpful to be in tune with the leadership of that business, that business unit, and talking about the trade-offs of, do we hire this role now? Do we wait? What does that look like? And really making it a partnership. And so when we talked earlier about putting on your business hat, I think this is a key example.
That is a really good point. And I think you both have brought this up. Like, sustainability, right? Like you don't know how, if this is a long-term growth play or if this is just short-term growth. I guess, how do you accommodate for that? I think I heard second D. I just learned about that. I think Gulzar, you told me about this because I didn't know what it was, or secondment. I'm sorry. Is that something you look at? Do you look at secondments? Do you look at contractors? Do you look at part-time help? Like, are those options that you generally look at to accommodate when you're not quite sure if it's a long-term investment or if that's necessary? Gulzar, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, hiring someone is a major commitment on behalf of the corporation. Like Frank said, I also think about, like, I don't want somebody to come here and then the work dries up and they're sitting there and twiddling their thumbs. That doesn't serve anybody well, frankly, right? It's not in the best interest of the company. It's also not in the best interest of the person who'd be coming to do that work. So before we go that route, I will always think critically about, are there other levers I can pull?
Sure.
And that'll be around outside counsel, which is really expensive.
Yep.
Or is it, secondment maybe from a law firm that tends to be more of a fixed fee price? Or is it maybe a contract attorney who comes in into our environment for a period of time to help us with whether that's an overflow of work or counseling in a specific area before, and that buys me a little bit of time and gives me a relief valve in terms of the work that my team is supporting. Again, I don't want them to burn out. That's something I think about a lot, right? It buys me time until I have more data internally to figure out, is this a sustainable position, and is this in the best interest of the organization? Because at the end of the day, it's got to be in the best interest of the organization. And again, making sure that whoever we hire, I'm going to have a job for them, and it's going to be a fulfilling job for them for years and years to come.
Absolutely. And Frank?
That's my approach as well.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to have a secondee or a contractor that you know who's going to be here for 6 months or longer, so that you can ramp and train them up for a few months, and then it's a mutually beneficial relationship where they're going to be learning about a certain business, getting valuable expertise for themselves, but also the business will then get to have like someone that's fully ramped to get through that period of time where it's really difficult. And burnout's a real thing. We see across our industry all the time. So it's critical when we see these issues, not only as managers but lawyers or legal professionals. Raise your hand, let your manager know you're getting burned out, because you're valued. So we want to keep you happy, and mental health is really important. Read a lot about it these days, and so please speak up if there's too much, because that will justify us going to leadership and kind of like giving more reasons why we should get external help, it's always tough.
Absolutely. That actually leads to my next question, and it's making the case for hire. And I'm thinking more of like an FTE, right? How do you make that case? For me personally, I had to go to a CFO and I presented data. I presented what we could do with another person. But is that always the right answer? And Frank, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, it's difficult getting approval for additional headcount for legal in any economic environment. And so I found that it's really helpful to have data to justify that ask. The questions I've always received, one from the business would be, how does this role help the business scale or grow? From legal, you're from the legal department, you'll hear, why can't you do this with current resources? Or, can we do this another way? Can we pull in someone from another team? And so those are questions you have to kind of work through and think about and be ready to answer before going to leadership. But so again, going back to understanding your team's workload is really important. And something that I've been doing over the last few years that's been really helpful is using internal tools and other external tools to create data and track our work to determine how long certain certain matters are taking, what's the workload for each person on my team. It kind of helps me think about that. And we use Jira and Smartsheets for some of this work. And it really has helped me take a data-driven approach to show the business hiring this person will mean turnaround time for contracts goes from X days down to Y days, whatever that is, and then talking to the legal leadership kind of explain that as well. It's been very helpful.
That's awesome. And Gulzar?
Yeah, so it's great to hear Frank share his perspective, and mine is very similar too. I don't know that I have the perfect formula, but typically what I look at it's kind of threefold. I look at the business case. I make sure I build a business case for it, and that's always tied to what's the organization facing, what are we doing that's really important. And sometimes I go in and ask my business partners to kind of help me actually support the headcount. I've used that very successful in the past, and tell me a little bit more on why we're seeing XYZ changes coming from your organization. That helps me kind of buttress my arguments for the headcount. The second part is financial. I will sometimes do the math and show like, this is how much it would cost me with outside counsel support. This is how much it is going to cost me with maybe bringing on a contract attorney. And this is what an FTE costs. And that includes not just their salary, but all the benefits and everything else they have to pay. And that's the financial angle of it. And the last part that I sometimes will use is, what does that FTE, one more FTE, like helps me unlock, right? What am I going to accomplish that's on the roadmap that we are not seeing? So on my team, for each part of my teams, I don't have anything super sophisticated, but it's a 2x2 matrix. And that helps me rank priority of where my teams are working on and what are the items in the parking lot, right, that we can't touch, or things that are not getting the attention that they need. And so that that particular chart helps me visualize kind of what are the things that are not getting the attention. And if I bring in that FTE, maybe it helps me unlock and put some of my other resources in this space, and then this helps unlock a different value. So I think about it from that treetop perspective too, in trying to understand, okay, one more FTE, what does that unlock for my organization and for my enterprise generally? So I, again, take a combination of those three approaches to understand how am I going to make this headcount request.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that with templatization. I can't even speak today. Templatizing certain agreements where you've looked at it and you're like, this is a project that's more or less like right in the parking lot, I think is the best way to put it. And you bring in someone who can handle that. And then all of a sudden, all these other tasks have been simplified because you have this person doing this role. And it's, I think it's both of you with the stellar approach. And you've both alluded to something I wanted to ask about. And I've heard this many times, and it's allying with the business to make that case. And I think as lawyers, and Gulzar, you said this earlier, which it's 100% true. You don't learn this in law school. You don't learn this business perspective. And I'd love to hear yours is, do you make, do you have them as an ally, and are they coming to bat for you, or are you asking them to come to you in order to make the case for a new FTE hire or a contractor or someone of the sort? And whoever wants to start, Gulzar, do you want to?
Yeah, I can offer. There was one time where, this was back in my career target, where we were trying to make a headcount request, and it was, we were in an expense optimization mode, but we were seeing just floodgates open with a particular, sphere of work, and we had gotten to a point where we knew we needed a headcount, but we had to make that request, and we were really nervous. And I did enlist some of my business partners to be my allies and go in with me on it, even though we were, obviously they're not paying for the headcount. And it was really helpful to have senior leaders in the business who were fully on board, understood what the value that we would bring with an additional attorney to the team and what that would, that would mean. It was, and I didn't go into it to, with the business partner to say, hey, can you come in and kind of be my ally? It was more going in from a questioning, for asking an open-ended question to say, hey, I am thinking about this. We think we're entertaining the thought of maybe having additional headcount. What do you think about that? Here's what I think about it. Tell me though, you think that would be valuable to have this, and let them kind of get, maybe, in some ways it's the buy-in, right? It helps them buy-in that they think it's also important, or maybe you'll get the answer no. They think hey, this work is going to not be sustainable. It's a really important, I think, exchange, and to come into it not to say, hey, I want you to back me up on this, but to go in and to genuinely ask the question of, what do you think about the ask that I'm about to make? And sometimes you will find some strong allyship just from having that conversation, if they also are aligned with you that this is a headcount resource that we think is justified.
That's awesome. Absolutely. And Frank?
Yeah, again, completely aligned. here. Working with the business has been critical throughout my career to justify additional headcount. When supporting sales teams, which I've done most of my career, using the data-driven approach has really helped show that by bringing in an additional person when other people might be overworked or not getting to additional workload will help, get deals done faster, get projects turned quickly, so that in turn, the business unit will be bringing in more revenue. Has helped me kind of like craft. I've crafted that story along with the business leader and the head of sales for that business unit, and so that's really helped.
Awesome. So here's back on track. I was more curious on that one. I'm sorry. Like some of these questions actually are personally for me because you have really good insight and I have you here for this. So let me ask you this. I think this is a question I get quite a bit. What is the hire? I guess, how do you know who to hire is probably the best way to frame that question. What drives that decision? And Frank, do you want to tackle this first?
Yeah, again, going back to the art versus science, I think it's more of an art. It's really trying to understand what the business needs are initially. And so if we go back to my example of thinking about if you're just overworked and the business isn't growing, or if there's an investment, if you're just overworked now, I think it'll be easier to identify that need because you'll understand it. And it's maybe because everyone's workload is 140, 150% of capacity. And so that's just really finding another, legal professional to come in and help. Whereas if the business is scaling and growing and there's a huge investment going in, from the executive leadership team, then it's really going to be understanding what the business goals are over the next 6 to 12 months, and out. And that will allow you to identify whether, the focus will be in ramping up the product, making the service better. And in that case, you probably look at focusing on like a product maturity first, instead of, if they're ramping up the sales team, if 80% of the hires will be in sales, then probably some contracts. So I think that's the way I kind of look at it. And going back, you still need to think about whether it's going to be a short-term impact or long-term, and that'll help you figure out whether you get an FTE or get a secondee or contractor.
And Gulzar.
I think the only additional thing I would add to what Frank has said is I also try to think about before we hired, okay, what are the existing strengths on my team, right? And especially if let's say I'm having to hire multiple positions supporting the same area, I may not necessarily post those positions at the same time because I want to kind of end up seeing who do I hire, and then we'll post a second position once I've hired that person, so I can figure out how to complement that skill set. Or alternatively, if I just have one position, I do think critically about what are the strengths I have, where are the opportunities, and put an emphasis on bringing somebody who is going to match and complement the team and provide that skill set that, again, just works beautifully with the other strengths that we may have on the team as well. And again, the last piece of it is I do think critically about, is this a person I'm going to be able to give a meaningful development opportunity to, because I don't necessarily want to hire someone who's also in a year going to be looking for a new job because it's no longer satisfactory as to what they're seeking, right? It's got to be the right fit from a career standpoint as well. And again, and a lot of that is highly dependent on what is the position we're recruiting for, and what are they going to do, and is that a match with what they're seeking next in their career, and what are they, like Frank was saying earlier on, where do they see themselves 3 to 5 years, and am I going to be able to provide that experience for this particular team member?
Awesome insight. So I don't have any other questions regarding building a team. My questions now, because it sounds like we've got it nailed. We've built our team to accommodate the growth of the business. Now, what about collaborating with the business? And I actually have a question from the audience to kind of kick us off into that topic. And it's working in specific business teams. How can we promote ourselves and show value, especially now that everyone is trying to do more with less? And Frank, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think promoting yourself internally, there's within the business, it is really it's helping the business see around corners and develop relationships. And so seeing around corners means, can you do something for the business, like attending their weekly team meetings, or doing something to align closer to get a different perspective on what they're doing, to show the business you are like invested in helping them, and that you don't necessarily just and that they don't see you as just someone from the legal department, but you're actually part of this team, right? You're a piece of the pie that's helping them get where they need to go. And then within the legal department, I think just advocating for the business unit you're supporting, showing how it's impacting and supporting the overall goals of the business is always a good way to just promote yourself within the department.
Awesome. And Gulzar?
Yeah, I agree with everything Frank said. And the only additional tidbit I can offer is, again, it goes back to, again, it's like, how do you show that value, right, to the business? And it's not about just, I'm here as a legal partner. I think you want them to see you as a strategic thought partner. That's always the goal, right? And I would say attending their meetings, their business meetings, is super important. And at first, you maybe just be a fly on the wall. You're a sponge. You're soaking it in. But then you're also exposed to information at those meetings. Later on, you may go to a different meeting and get some other information. You can show your value sometimes by helping connect the dots, actually. Again, that's not necessarily a legal role per se, but they're like, oh, and then suddenly you start talking at these meetings, right? We've been sitting silent because you're in a sponge, you're absorbing all the information. Yeah. And suddenly you start like, hey, that's a really great, what an interesting initiative. And I heard so-and-so over here, they were interested actually in a similar path. There might be some synergies. Maybe you could consider talking to that individual. Like, you can offer value that way that has absolutely nothing to do with your legal skills or how you're going to spot issues. But I think business partners do value that. And then the second part was like, as you get more comfortable in that space, don't shy away from also opining on, I'll make it very clear. I'll say, because some people, like, when they think I'm speaking as a lawyer, right? I'll say, hey, I'm taking my legal hat off and I'm putting my business hat on. Let me comment on what you just said. And I'll be honest with you, it took me years and years to be able to get comfortable to say that, because I also had a little bit of an imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a business person, really. But I've always been more of a business person than I thought I was. But it took me a while to get that confidence to speak up in the business meetings and start opining. And I have found that business folks are very receptive, or not everyone, okay, but there are folks who are going to be receptive to some of your ideas and may take it. And the other thing I'll say is, sometimes you may feel that you're hitting a barrier. I've certainly hit a barrier, there in parts of my career where I want to do this exact same thing that our attendees asking, trying to go to these meetings, and they'll say, yeah, no, you're not invited. That's not for you. And in fact, I had one time a leader who asked me, like, why are you here? You're the lawyer, aren't you? You don't need to come. Like, I've had those kinds of interactions too. And in those cases, my recommendation is, don't get discouraged. If somebody is kind of shutting that door for you and not letting you in, you will find other people in the organization and seek them out, who will open that door for you, who will invite you in. I remember, there was one meeting I was always just trying to go to because it was a really important meeting for the organization at Target, like back in the day. This was about 8 years ago. And the person who was kind of leading it was like, no, like, I don't think this is the right fit for you. I don't think you're going to get any value out of it. But I had my own agenda as to why I wanted to be there. I was trying to be more proactive. But I found other supporters who were like, you know what, maybe it's not this meeting, but why don't you come and sit in this meeting? I think that's just as useful. And they had control over who gets invited to these other meetings that were just as helpful. So seek supporters and you will find them. I promise you. Just because one or two people shoot you down or don't invite you, and don't get discouraged. There will be people, if you tell them what kind of journey you're on and what you're trying to do, they will support you.
That's awesome advice. Absolutely awesome advice. I actually have nothing to add there, because I had the same experience where I tried to join as many meetings as I could. You're right, as a fly on the wall, just soaking it in. And it was very helpful. I'll ask y'all this. What about for the other members of your team? Do you have them come as well with you to these meetings? Do they go separately? Is there a strategy to it to more or less integrate your legal team with the business? And Frank, do you want to take a stab at it?
Sure. So great question. I've tried to invite certain people from the team over the years to certain leadership meetings that I'm involved in to have them either present or listen to certain topics. That's very helpful. And then something else we've done is just organize meetings with more senior folks from the business unit with the junior members of our team, so they can get exposure and get used to that interaction, and then gradually have them just meeting with some of those people by themselves. I think it helps. But it's a great question, and it's something that I try to find ways to incorporate.
Awesome. And Kozar?
Yeah, one approach I have more recently taken is I've actually started not attending certain meetings and instead having my direct reports attended, because I want the business to start seeing them as the kind of the leader in that space, as the subject matter expert. And even though I want to go to those meetings too, I just know it's in the best interest of our team to have them be the face of legal, to have them be the ambassadors, right? So I won't go to those meetings, even though I kind of want to be there. But like I said, I'm like, that doesn't serve me well. I need my direct report to be the person that they think as their, strategic thought partner, not me. They can always come to me. So that's a way we develop. And again, my expectation of my lawyers is that you are sitting in those business meetings. Let's figure out which ones of those are right. And we need to be embedded with the business, because that's what makes us valuable to the organization. And that's how we can unleash efficiency and fluidity within our own team, right? And so again, it's being able to step back. And also if you're a junior lawyer and there are meetings that your boss is going to, ask them, be like, hey, I noticed, like if you calendar scroll, whatever, it's totally okay. And you see that your boss goes to this meeting that you're interested in, and you can ask and frame it in a way that I don't think is threatening or anything like, or is not like, it wouldn't come off as wrong to say, hey, I'd really be interested in learning more. Can I tag along with you to the meeting, and see the reaction they have? And some of them, sometimes it's possible in some of these meetings there are some highly confidential issues that are being discussed where it may not be appropriate. But again, it's also an invitation for the leader, right? And for you to say, like, I'm really interested in learning more. And they may say, hey, maybe this one is not appropriate, but let me bring you to these other meetings that you may not know about that I think would be a good way to stretch you, or an opportunity for you to be exposed to the side of the organization. Or maybe, hey, this one is we're discussing something sensitive, but maybe next time I'd like to bring you to this to the meeting that you've asked to be brought to.
We received a comment saying, I want to work for both of you guys. I'm going to join the comment because I agree. I think this is absolutely stellar. And again, as you're an attorney attempting to develop yourself and be more of a, the best practitioner you could possibly be, this is it. Like, this is perfect. I appreciate the insight. I have one final question for you both. You've alluded to morale, right? Certain activities that boost morale for everybody. I think it's obviously growth opportunities, just like what we just discussed, bringing folks to these meetings to feel part of the team, to learn, to be the subject matter expert. Are there any other tools or things that you've been doing to boost morale of your legal teams? And Gulzar, if you want to start.
Sure. We are sometimes, especially in my space, sometimes we're in positions where we always have to, we may have to deliver a tough message, right, to the business team that might be at odds with what they want to do, right? Especially, if you haven't had a chance, let's say, interact with them. And so, driving that can be exhausting, right? That also could lead to burnout, et cetera. So I think one thing I do is, I acknowledge it with my team, and I tell them, like, listen, I worry about well-being. What does well-being mean to you? What do you want to do more of? And I think, again, the team knowing that, it is something I do think about, I think is important to just address it, period. And then the second part is I do practice gratitude and making sure that my team routinely knows how much I appreciate that the work that they do, because it is meaningful for people to know not only your leader appreciates it, but also a link to how's your work supporting and driving these greater changes. And I think that helps boost the morale to know that, hey, this is really tough in the moment and I'm having a hard, time maybe, or I'm working a lot, but it's making a difference. And it's important sometimes for us as leaders to connect those dots because it may not be as obvious, and to do that as well. And third is I routinely do encourage my team. I tell them like, hey, look, if you're going through a period where you need a break or you should be taking a vacation, please do it because I need you to keep working, right? And I don't want you to leave me. So like, what do we need to do to make sure that you are still engaged and you're highly engaged in these matters? And because that can look different to a different individual. So it's really important to understand what drives different people and how do you keep someone engaged in that work is very different, I think, from individual to individual. So as a manager, it's understanding that. And if you have teams where you have indirect reports, like I meet with my indirect reports quarterly, but also like spreading that message to my direct reports to be really doing the same with their teams as well.
That's stellar, absolutely stellar. Frank, what are your thoughts?
I guess throughout the pandemic, we built our team, and it's pretty spread out now. I think pre-pandemic we were mostly in San Francisco. Now we're all over the country, and so throughout the pandemic we did a lot of like the Zoom happy hours, which my team told me, all right, Frank, we're starting to get tired of this. It's kind of weird. So we don't do as many of those, but we've always had like pretty open, regular team meetings, which are great. I try to keep it pretty light and let the team kind of bring up topics that they want. And that allows us to get into talking about each other's dogs or pets or whatever else. If there's a pet barking in the background, they kind of get brought into the meeting. It's always fun. So I think just getting to know each other and building like that team bond is really important. And so when we're working remotely, I think we're just constantly trying to find ways to kind of make everyone that isn't based, in San Francisco, feel like they're part of the team, which they obviously are. Another way is I try to find ways to staff projects, larger projects with multiple attorneys, or even if it's like a really complicated contract negotiation, having multiple people work on it. So, you build, at least for me, I've always built bonds with the people I've worked really closely with on big large projects. And so I'm starting to see those bonds be created throughout the team, which I'm really excited to see. And for those in San Francisco, we're getting back to the office. And so, just being back in person, having lunch with each other, laughing, talking about, what we've been watching at night it's so refreshing. It's nice. And so we're planning more events around the office. We're right up the street from the San Francisco Giants. So we're going to have everyone fly out and go to some games together and kind of hang out. So we're trying just to build that kind of environment back into the team.
We're invited, right? Like Gulzar and I are invited.
We're going to get bleacher seats, but you're definitely invited.
I was just going to say, I have to work for Frank too.
Friday afternoon, we'll do it.
I'm pretty sure about the folks from Law Trades are watching this right now. They should be worried, guys. I might end up over here. Jokes aside, thank you guys so much. This was awesome insight. I know everyone watching, we had a bunch of questions. I know everyone watching truly appreciates it, appreciates your time. And they may reach out through social media if that's okay. We've had this in the past. We're asking questions because what you've provided today, I think, is stellar, and more people may ask to expand upon it. So thank you again, everyone. If you're watching, thank you again for watching. We have more events coming up. We actually have a commercial contracts white paper that just was released. We can provide the link. If you reach out, it'll be on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all of our other channels. It's on our website as well. Have a great weekend, everybody, or have a great week. I don't even know what day today is. Thank you, everybody. Talk soon.